Hello, historians. This is Mr. Fredo. Today we arrive at a sad moment in our study of history, the fall of Rome, the end of the western half of the Roman Empire, complete loss of control to where the Romans and their leaders could no longer control and defend and protect this area that they had worked so hard to take control of over the course of hundreds and hundreds of years. A couple things real quick. Number one, the fall of Rome does not refer to a particular season in their history. Number two, the fall of Rome does not refer to the city of Rome literally falling over, as some young historians are confused by. It means a complete loss of control and a complete, essentially, an abandonment of the western half of that empire. The eastern half is going to remain intact. We'll talk about that here in a second. But in the process of learning about this, we focus on the big six reasons that this all comes to an end. And I know it's sad, but I think we can all relate. Great things throughout history and great things throughout our lives do come to an end. Who would have ever thought that Zayn would have left One Direction? Who would have ever thought that the couple who ended up together on The Bachelorette would have broken up? Who would have ever thought that MySpace would no longer be so popular? You can think of all different examples throughout your life and throughout history, but it is an unfortunate reality. All great things do eventually come to an end. Now, there's a common phrase associated with the Roman Empire that says Rome wasn't built in a day. It's true. It took hundreds and hundreds of years for that empire to be created. But Rome doesn't fall in a day either. It takes hundreds and hundreds of years in a series of multiple events that eventually leads to the Romans losing control. So let's go through the big six really quickly. Number one is overexpansion. This one's pretty easy to understand. It is simply too big. Remember, it's 2.2 million square miles worth of land, plus all of the people within it, plus all the bodies of water. It's too big to control. It's too big to govern. It's too big to finance or pay for. As great as the Romans were with all of their creations and engineering, it really doesn't matter. When you have an area this big in that time period, eventually it's going to become too much. Number two is enemies. In the process of expanding and taking over all of these different territories throughout Western Europe, Africa, and Western Asia, they create a lot of enemies along the way, because that means the Romans are taking land from other people. Over time, these different enemies, you can see many of them noted here on the map, they deliver a constant stream of attacks. And I want to emphasize attacks. It's not a single attack that takes the Romans out. It's not two attacks. It's hundreds of years of the Romans constantly having to defend their borders and defend themselves inside. And eventually, all of those attacks weaken the Romans in the west to the point where that land is going to become up for grabs. Number three is excessive taxation. Remember, everywhere the Romans went, they tried to recreate the prestige of Rome. That costs a lot of money. And how do you pay for all of those temples and all those stadiums and all those racetracks and arenas and buildings? You pay for it through taxes. Okay, now I'm sure that we can all relate that we've heard somebody complain about taxes in our lives, but taxes in many cases are not bad. They serve a great purpose. They provide our schools, for example, in Delaware, Ohio. But excessive problems for the Romans, become the problem, because that means they become way too high and way too frequent. And when they become too high and too frequent, that means the people of Rome can't pay them. And when they're not paying them, the people are losing money. The city of Rome is losing money. The empire of Rome is losing money. And essentially, they become broke. They go into a financial depression where there's not jobs available, there isn't work available, and building and progress essentially comes to a halt. Number four is abandonment. Going right along with that is when people stop paying these taxes and when the government runs out of money, people start to leave their land. And that's a big problem. It sounds like a simple solution, but it creates a big problem, because when they would leave their land, the land would deteriorate to the point where it could no longer be used to farm. That's going to create food shortages, it's going to create conflict, and it's a huge stream of problems that are created for the Roman, because if people can't pay their taxes, the government doesn't have any money to pay people. And if you're not paying people to do really hard work like farming or construction, they aren't going to stick around. They're going to leave. It causes the actual physical land of the Roman Empire to deteriorate. Number 5, the moving of the capital. For the first 200 to 300 years of the Roman Empire's history, the capital city was Rome. Eventually, around the time of an emperor known as Constantine, he moves the capital, or at least, according to some historians, creates a second capital, Constantinople, named after himself. And when he does that, it divides the empire in half. So what that means is, of the little bit of money that was available because the taxes were so high, and the little bit of land that is salvageable, all of it's getting concentrated into the east in what will become known as the Byzantine Empire. The east is where the emperor goes. He goes to the city that's named after him. So, of course, where do all the resources of the empire go? They also go to the east, and that essentially leaves, that's really one of the final blows for the Romans. It leaves the west completely unprotected because all of the resources are dedicated in the east. And then lastly, a constant problem throughout the history of the empire, and a problem that existed, frankly, from its very inception, is corruption in the government and never having a plan for who the next leader would be. We'll talk about this a lot in class, but it would not be uncommon for one emperor to be in control for 6 months, only to be killed by his own guards because someone else with a lot of money had slipped those guards some money to take that emperor out. Corruption and bribery and lying and stealing and murder was constant throughout the Roman Empire. It causes a constant state of disarray and a constant state of chaos throughout the empire. It's hard to overcome. And then lastly, within that same problems related to the government, the Romans never had a plan for who was going to come next. It was supposed to be the next son, but a lot of times that son could be bribed away, or that son could be killed, or there could be assassination attempts. It again feeds into the chaos of the empire itself. So Rome wasn't built in a day, and all of these problems don't take out Rome and cause the fall of Rome in a day. But you can see, amidst this great empire that we've learned about over the last several weeks, there were also a lot of problems. And it really causes you to look at the process of creating an empire. Is it possible to create an empire that is going to stand the test of time?